Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Today we're continuing Book 2, looking at Chapter 6, and we'll be looking at the question of virtues, right? In the previous chapter, he looked at the three dimensions of whether virtue was a passion, capacity, or characteristics, and he basically eliminated the passion and capacity and focused on it as a characteristic, something to be praised or blamed, right? So let's continue. Yet one ought to say not only this, that virtue is a characteristic, but also what sort of characteristic it is. So it's not only characteristic, but what kind of, we want to talk about virtue, right? That it's a characteristic. What kind of characteristic? So it must be stated that every virtue brings a virtue, both brings that of which it is the virtue into a good condition and causes the work belonging to that thing to be done well. So, in other words, it's twofold. A virtue is a characteristic, but it's one a characteristic that does two things. One, it brings that to which it is a virtue into a good condition, okay, and causes the work to be done belonging to that thing, that thing in question, the thing that, to be done well, well done, okay, done finely in that sense, or done well. For example, the virtue of the eye makes both the eye and its work excellent. For by means of the eye, by means of the virtue of the eye, we see well. Now, excellent here, 14, is serious, spoudios, right? I think this is the problem, serious. Spoudios. This is what's, and a couple chapters before, I was freaking out about the word excellence. And spoudios sometimes and arete can we normally treat arete as excellence. Traditionally, spoudios has been serious, but he translates it here excellent, and this is a big pain in the ass. Okay, why? Because this is something I know. I've been this recently. I just got this. Spoudios has always been, different translators. I just got the new third edition of the Irwin edition. When I was a graduate student, one of the editions of ethics I used, well, as an undergraduate, one of the first editions of ethics I used was Oswald. I forget the first name. It was Bob Merrill, publisher of it, of the very famous. I forget the name of the first name, but Oswald was the uh, um, uh, uh, okay, I just want to check Martin Oswald. Martin Oswald translation, and Martin Oswald's translation was very much influenced by a little. He was a classicist, a very important classicist in that sense. In if the 40s, 50s, he wrote some very important books about Greek political thought and nomos particularly. Um, he influenced some people I know. Oswald was at University, I think, at Pennsylvania, or one of the guys I know. Not Newell. What's his name? Oh, he's retired now. He's he's a naval captain, but also a classics guy I know very well, and I'm blanking on his name. I hope he's still alive. He was teaching at the University of Pennsylvania for a long time. Um, um, he was trained by Oswald and that stuff. But Oswald was my first thing. But I objected to Oswald's translation of a lot of things because it was very Kantian. Some of the language he phrased it in almost post presented Aristotle's account like Kant, and this echoed what Richard McKinnon did in his translation, famous translation of the Ethics. Following the bond, kind of, which was there's the bonds was the English tradition, which also kind of tried to make it kind of more analytic, Then, of course, we all know that the addition we're using for here, of course, it was done in about like less than a decade ago, but it's done by two students of the Straussians in that sense, and therefore seeks to give a very literal meaning of this, and opposed to McKinnon. Okay, that's why. So therefore, I'm frustrated when he does this with Spudaios. I think this is interesting. I think why excellent. This is tied to virtue. We should always see excellence in terms of doing the thing right, right? Doing it in terms of virtue, arete, in that sense. So therefore, his translation of it here as excellent, spudaios here as excellent, is a little off-putting. I'm happy that he put a note here. It's important that he put a note here because he uses it again in the next sentence, right? He'll say, Spudaios, this is Spudaios, this is serious, this is something serious here, and it's better to put serious. In other words, he's trying to suggest that there's something here that makes the eye and its work serious, right? It's not laughable, not ridiculous in that sense. For it means the virtue of the eyes, and similarly, the virtue of the horse makes the horse both serious and good, right? When it comes to running and carrying its rider and standing its ground before its enemies. Now, this is interesting. Why does Aristotle use spudaios and not arete? He wants to, and I think this is because he's trying to talk about arete, and he wants to connect spudaios with arete in this idea, in this sense. I think there is this. He wants to suggest that in arete it points to arete is not virtue in itself, but it points to something towards virtue in that sense. Okay, as the good also points to virtue in that sense. Um, um, Standing, it is the horse does when it comes to running, carrying its riding, and standing before its enemies. If indeed this is so in all cases, then the virtue of a human being too would be that characteristic as a result of which a human being becomes good, as the result of which he causes his own work to be done well, right? In other words, it becomes good in the work that is done well. A virtue, thus, is a human. The virtue of a human being is a characteristic of a result of which a human being becomes good. In other words, his action leads him to become better, good, and what, and that his own work is done well. And how this will be, we have already stated, right? This idea, how this is, because it's a characteristic of that sense. Um, but virtue will be further manifest also as follows. If we contemplate what sort of thing it is, in other words, if we contemplate what sort of thing its nature is. So we have to understand, we have to contemplate what sort of thing its nature is, virtue's nature is. In everything continuous and divisible, it is possible to grasp the more, the less, and the equal. And these either in reference to the thing itself or in relation to us. So this is like this. So in everything continuous or divisible, right, it is possible to grasp more or less and the equal, and these either in reference to the thing itself or its relation in relation to us. The equal is also a certain middle term, a tomeson, is a certain middle term between excess and deficiency, right? The equal is a middle term, a mesos, meson, domeson, the middle term. He says, note 15, the middle term, the middle, although not necessarily the literal center of something, as distinguished from he meso, which will always be rendered as the mean, right? So this is the middle term, the middle term. This is what he wants to distinguish between tomeson and he mestos, right? This is the insistence of he's translating. But they're connected. The tomeson versus the he metos, right? So therefore, the middle term the equal is a certain middle term between excess and deficiency. By the middle term of the thing, that of the middle term, I mean by the middle term of a thing, that which stands at an equal remove from each of the extremes, which is in fact one and the same thing for all. So therefore, it is that, in other words, the extremes of either excess or defect, right? The extremes of is the action, the excess of it, and the defect. The thing is that equal. It is the middle is the equal between the two. He says, right? Although in relation to us, Though in relation to us, it is that which neither takes too much nor is deficient, right? So, in relation to the thing itself, it's the middle point between excess and deficiency. But in regards to us, it is, again, not takes too much or nor deficient, he says. But this is not. But this is not one thing, nor is it the same for all. So in other words, it's not uniform, he's saying here. It's not the same for all. It's not one thing. For example, if 10 is much, but 2 is few, 6 is a middle term for those who take it in reference to the thing itself. For it both exceeds and is exceeded by an equal amount. And this is the middle term according to the arithmetic proposition. So therefore, by the logic of arithmetics, this is the mean from arithmetic. But one ought not to grasp in this way the middle term relative to us. For if eating 10 pounds, for if eating 10 pounds is a lot, but 2 pounds is too little, the trainer will not prescribe 6 pounds, since perhaps even this is a lot or too little for him who takes it. Okay, right? In other words, why? Because, as he says, for Milo, it would be too little. For someone just starting gymnastic training, it would be too much. Now, Milo here is the famous wrestler of the late 6th century, hailing from Croton. He is said to have won 6 victory Olympic Games and 6 at the Pythian Games, right? So this Milo, this character, is big, someone who's really there, who's been a full-time professional victorious wrestler. That for him, 6 may be too little. In other words, what is right for us will be relative to us. So what is mathematical is absolute, but what is relevant to us, it has to be in relation to us. What is truly good for us, beneficial for us. It is similarly in the case of running and that of wrestling. This gives another example. Thus, every knower of the excess and the deficiency avoids them, but seeks out the middle term and chooses this. Yet not a middle belonging to the thing in question, but rather the one relative to us. So therefore, when we're talking about running and excellence, the middle term is not just the middle term of the pure mathematical. As he says, it's not the question of the thing itself. Right? Seeks out the middle term, yet not a middle belonging to the thing in question, but rather the middle regarding to us. Indeed, every science in this way brings its work to its own conclusion by looking to the middle term and guiding the work towards this. So every science seeks the middle. In other words, he's saying every science, every kind of knowledge, brings its work to this good conclusion by looking to the middle term, this point between excess and deficiency, and guiding the work towards this. Hence, people are accustomed to saying that there is nothing to take away from or add to works that are in a good state, on the grounds that the good state is destroyed by excess or deficiency. But the middle, preserves it. And the good craftsman, as we say, performs their work by looking to this. In other words, here the mean preserves it. In other words, it's the middle point, the middle stage between excess and deficiency. If you've achieved what is right, adding or subtracting to it ruins it. Even adding a little bit to it ruins it. It's no longer perfect. Once you've hit the right, what is perfect, then adding to it or subtracting it in any sense ruins it. He says nothing can take nothing away from it. In other words, nothing to take away from it or add to the works that are in a good state on the grounds that the good state is destroyed by excess and deficiency. But the mean preserves it. So again, the good craftsman looks towards this. Virtue is more arete, in that sense. Virtue is more precisely and better than every art, as is nature as well. So therefore, virtue is more precise and better than every art, as is nature as well. So in other words, nature is even better than the. I understand to say virtue is more precise and better than art, techne, as is nature as well. Nature is better than every art, techne as well, right? If all this is so, then virtue would be skillful at aiming at the middle term. So then virtue is the ability to hit this middle term, he's saying, right? But I mean moral virtue. Ethique, right? Ethique virtue. A virtue that's concerned with ethique. For it is concerned with passions and actions. And it is in these that excess and deficiency in the middle term reside. So, in other words, this concern of the tomesos is concerned in the level of action. Right? It's concerned with action in this sense, with the passions and action, praxis. Because it's in this realm that excess and deficiency and the tomeson, resides. For example, it is possible to be afraid, to be confident, to desire, to be angry, to feel pity, and in general to feel pleasure and pain to a greater and lesser degree than one ought. And in both cases, this is not good. In other words, you can, in all this, you can be, example, to be afraid, confident, to desire, to be angry, to pity, and to feel pleasure and pain in greater and lesser degrees than one should. And in both, the greater and lesser is not good, agathon. But to feel them when one ought and at the thing one ought. So it's in relation to the people whom one ought, for the sake of which and as one ought, all these constitute the middle, as well as what is Aristos best, which is in fact what belongs to arete, virtue. Now, I would just say, this is, part of me would go, I want to highlight this. I would highlight this. I can't do that. No highlighting. This is my PDF and I can't do the highlighting. Again, repeat this. I think this is the key sentence. We have to understand what virtue is. Virtue is not, in other words, but to feel them when one ought to. And at the things you should feel these things, to feel them when one ought to, at the things one ought to, and in relation to those people whom one ought, for the sake of what and as one ought. All these constitute the middle as well as the best. And this is what virtue is. Virtue is not only understanding what is, it is, you're going to feel the right amount of all these things. Pity, in other words, afraid, fear, confidence, desire, anger, pity, pleasure and pain, the right amount, at the right time, towards the right people, to the right degree, and that it achieves what? That is, it is neither excessing or defect, and for the sake of what? The right thing, or the right action, the right, you know, that this is, this is what belongs to virtue. Similarly, in the case of actions too, there is an excess, and so there are actions. Therefore, passion. Therefore, we can talk about feelings, right? Passions, they can be excess, but also actions. This is interesting. Passion and actions, you can have excess and defect, he says here. Simultaneously in the case of actions too. There is an excess, a deficiency, and a middle term. Virtue is concerned with passion and actions, in the which the excess is an error and the deficiency is blamed. The reading of the manuscript by Gautier follows Bywater and deletes the term, deletes the verb translated as is blamed. Right? Some gets rid of this. They get rid of this. They delete this. Some manuscripts. Then there was Joliffe, Bywater followed Barnett deletes this. They're gonna, he's gonna keep this word. This is and deficiency is blamed, but the middle term. But the middle term is praised and guides one correctly, and both praise and correct guidance belong to virtue. So both praise and correct guidance belongs to arete. So therefore, this is interesting. That let's go for a second. He says virtue is concerned with passions and actions, right? And the excess of and the excess of which is error, and deficiency is, so therefore excess or deficiency is in error and is blame. Both of them, this and this are both in error and are blamed, but the middle term is praised and it guides one correctly, and both praise and correct guidance belongs to virtue. Virtue, therefore, is a certain mesos, right? Since it, at any rate, is skillful at aiming at the middle term. Virtue is aiming at that middle term between excess and defect. Further, while it is possible to be in error in many ways, for what is bad is unlimited or intermediate, indeterminate, not intermediate, sorry, indeterminate, as the Pythagoreans used to conjecture. What is good, limited or determinate, right? There is only one way to guide someone correctly. So therefore, in other words, the bad, the error is numerous, unlimited, and indeterminate. The correct way, what is good and correct, is limited or determinate. Therefore, there is one way to guide someone correctly. And thus, the former is easy, the latter hard. The error is easy, correctness is hard. It is easy to miss the target, it's hard to hit it. On account of these considerations, then, to vice belongs the excess and deficiency, to virtue the mean. So therefore, you're repeating here. In other words, because it's easy to be excess or defect is easy, it's because it's, but hitting the right thing, hitting the right mark, hitting the mean, that's hard. And therefore, to vice belongs to excess and deficiency, and virtue belongs to the mean. He quotes here, for people, for they are good in one way, but in all kinds of ways bad, right? This is again, Alternative reading suggested by Alexander of Apraesius, among others, and adapted by Water will give the following translation. Regarding the mean relative to us, a mean defined by the argument by which the prudent person. Sorry, that's the 19. I'm wrong. I'm reading the wrong thing. This is 18. Not the usual words translated as good, agathos, but the more poetic, elethos. The author of the verse is unknown. So there's unknown author. This is a line. This is poetry. Someone says this. Not good, not agathos, but elethos, right? For they, the people, for people are good in one way, but in all kinds of ways bad. This is a poet. He's giving a poetic verse here, right? The quote right there. Virtue, therefore, is a characteristic marked by choice, residing in the mean relative to us, a characteristic defined by logos, reason, and as the prudent person would define it. 19. Now, an alternative reading suggested by Alexander of Apraesius, among others, and adopted by Bywater, would give the following translations. Residing in the mean relative to us, a mean defined by that argument by logos, by which the prudent person would define it. Okay, I'm more. I think I'm with Bywater here, but both I would argue don't really. There's not the difference between this is it's here. The problem here is we understood logos as reason. They understand it. He translated it as reason, but logos is both reason and argument. And the prudent one, the prudent person, would dictate it, right? The phonesis. So the prudent person would define it, right? So I think I don't think this is a big fundamental disagreement between here. It is this nitpicking, but okay. Virtue is also a mean with respect to vices. The one vice relates to excess, and the other to deficiency. So, in other words, virtue is a mean point between two vices. One to excess, one to deficiency. And further, it is a mean because some vices fall short and others exceed what should be the case in both passions and action. Whereas virtue discovers and chooses the middle term. So that here, the correct action, the correct thing is the middle term, and you choose the correct action, the correct thing in terms of, or the correct reaction. How are you going to hear fear and passion? How are you going to handle it, fear and passion? Are you going to handle it correctly? It's that right here, this one. Not too much, not excess, not defect. Okay? Same thing in terms of the action. So passion and action. Thus, respect to its being and its definition that states what it is. Virtue is a mean, but with respect to what is best and the doing of something well, it is an extreme, right? Because why is it extreme? It's a mean in regards to what it is, a target, right? In respect to the being and its definition, what virtue is. It's a mean between excess and defect, right? It's that middle point. But respect what is best and doing of something well, it is an extreme in that sense because it's hard. But this is what he means by extreme. It's not something that is easy in that sense. It's not something. It's not simply just you're going to fall into it in that sense, right? It's going to be done. It's not going to be that always happening. It's going to be harder. It's going to be, again, remember the indefinite versus the definite, right? Earlier above. But not every action or every passion admits of a mean. For some have names that are immediately associated with baseness. For example, spitefulness, shamelessness, envy, and when it comes to action, adultery, theft, and murder. So some actions, in other words, not every action and every passion admits to a mean point because it itself is a base action. It's associated with baseness. He gives example of this. He says what? He says spitefulness, shamelessness, envy, inactions, adultery, theft, murder. For all these things, and those like them are spoken of being themselves based, rather than just their excesses and deficiency. In other words, less adulterous is not adult. You know, you're still adulterous. More adulterous. It's adulterous is bad. This being having committing adultery, this act, murder, more murder, less murder doesn't matter. You're still bad. Theft, more theft, little theft, more theft. No theft, you're not a thief then. But less, more, or less. Okay, a little thief is still a thief. It's still base. It's now a big thief, or what's the worst? The simple murder or mass murder. Yes, a simple murder is still bad, but at the question, we consider the mass murderer worse, right? It doesn't make him good, but it doesn't make him. But in relative scale to them, you can see that this is less bad than that. You can speak of things I'm being less, but these some conditions are simply bad, right? For all these things, like those like them are spoken of as being in themselves base, rather than just their excess or deficiencies. It is not even possible then to be correct as regards them, but one is always in error. So that condition is always in error. And it is not possible to do what concerns such things well or not well. By committing adultery with the woman one ought, and when one ought. That's a great line. Virtue, you should do something that the right person at the right time and the right degree. That right, doing the right thing to the right person at the right. Here, it's not like he says. Committing adultery with the woman one ought, and when one ought. This just doesn't make any difference. It's still bad. Rather, doing any of these things, whatever, is simply an error. So some passions and some actions are simply bad, not good. They're wrong. Some things can be wrong or right, depends on how they're being done, when they're being. In other words, it's relative. Some things are relative, but some things are simply bad, right? He gives the cases here of the bad, the simply bad, right? Rather, doing any of these things in regard to is simply an error. Similarly to this, then is thinking it right that as regards committing injustice, being a coward and liking and acting licentiously, therefore is a mean, an excess, and a deficiency. In this way, there will be a mean of an excess and of a deficiency, an excess of an excess, and a deficiency of a deficiency. Right? In other words, you can't do this. You can't have an excess of an excess or a deficiency of a deficiency. It is wrong. You can. I mean, that does exist, but they're still what they are, excesses and deficiencies. And therefore they're wrong. They're not good. They're not a good. They're not a middle term. They're not something that is missile. There is no middling term about it. It is either something in excess or a defect. Being a coward, committing an injustice, acting licentiously. No, there's no middle term here to this. Um, and just as there's no excess and deficiency of moderation, sophosune and courage, on account of the middle terms being somehow an extreme, so too there would not be a mean or an excess and a deficiency for those base act mentions above. In other words, there's no. He's going to say that there's no logical excess or deficiency of those base acts. Now, you can say that, well, okay, those base acts, but do we there is a kind of a we do kind of see, we look at a mass murder, we look at someone who simply kills one person versus someone who kills many people. We tend to see this guy as more bad than that person. And we don't see this guy as good, we see him as less bad, right? Someone who just has an affair with one, but then who has affairs with many people. Again, this person is still bad, but this person, we may see this person as more bad, this person less bad. But they're not good. They're still less bad. So but at the same time, he wants to say that from the terms of this logic, these base concepts are not means. There's not a mean to them, right? And therefore, so there too would not be a mean or an excess or deficiency. Base acts mentioned above, rather, however, they are done, however they are done, they are in error. So the question is, there's no mean point that you can hit in it. That in that kind of activity of that and that, there's no mean point that it's good. The mean point is not doing it at all. Not doing it. They are therefore, for in general, there is neither a mean or an excess or of deficiency, nor an excess and deficiency of a mean. So that's a word for in general, there is neither a mean of an excess or of a deficiency. So if, in other words, in an excess or a deficiency, there's no mean in it. The mean would not be doing it, right? Nor an excess and deficiency of something that's mean. Because if it's a mean, it's right, it's correct. Now, if the second you do more than what is required, or less deficiency of it, then it's no longer a mean. So this is kind of a definitional issue here. The mean is not the excess. The mean is that middle state, that middle point between excess and deficiency. One in terms of the thing itself, and then one in terms of relation to us, right? That's how we understand it. This is how we understand the mean. Okay, let's stop here. If you have any comments or questions about this idea, this whole chapter is about the question of the mean, but what virtue is in terms of a characteristic, and it's a characteristic of this middle state and mean, both in terms of the thing itself and to us. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, if you have any issues you want to talk about here, please put in the questions and I'll respond to it. If you have any issues, if you want more further explanation or you want some help on this, please put the comments and I will respond when I see them. If you like the video, like it, hit the like button. Please get the like button. It helps get attention to us. If you know friends, share it far and wide. Get your friends, get their attention to it. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, because the more subscriptions we get, the better for the channel. Encourage people who you think would like this, what we're doing here, and or my other videos, to subscribe and help the channel grow. If you don't like it, you had something wrong, you thought something was wrong here, and you have a criticism or a negative, of course, you can always hit the dislike button. But please say why in the comments, and that way we can learn. If you think I'm saying there's something wrong, or you disagree with something I've done, or you don't like the way things going, comments, please, in that sense. That way people can learn, and this is the purpose of this, in that sense. Another thing you can do is, if you want to follow me on social media, you can do so by following my social media links below. If you want to know about me more as a scholar and as my things I do my research on, you can look at me below the social media, our academic social media links. That links to my scholarly works and my research. And another thing you can do is, you want to help me to do what I do, you can want to contribute through financially, in the sense. You can do so through Subscribe Star and Patreon. Links are below. Another thing you can do is you can buy one of my books. You can do so. My three published books are listed below. You can order them through Amazon or through Barnes & Noble or any online service, or you buy your local bookstore. Again, the best book to do if you're interested in studying the politics, my notebook Aristotle Politics, buying it through Lulu, the publisher, would be best because I get the biggest amount of money then. Okay, that's it. If you've not have any more questions on this, we will turn next time in the next video to chapter 7. So I will stop here today and wish you guys a happy day and a good day, and see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.